Justin, what's going on, my friend? How are we doing today?
It's happening, man. How are you doing? I'm excited for today's episode.
No, it's gonna be fun. We got Steve Lavin joining the show, and we're gonna talk some college hoops with him, and obviously the craziness that's going on there. But hey, just living the dream over here. You know how it is.
So, what's the reasoning behind the Toronto Raptors hat? Which, by the way, is like, if you're talking about '90s NBA uniforms, I think is top 3. But I'm just curious, what's your tie to the Raptors?
I just like the logo, the throwback logo. I couldn't find a Grizzlies hat. I am a sucker for that black Grizzlies jersey though from back in the day. I really want one of those. And Damon Stoudemire played for him, so I'm always going to have something about this particular logo. And then obviously the best dunker of all time, Vinsanity. That's pretty dope.
It's over.
So you ready to do this?
Let's make it happen, man.
Let's go.
Yo, your fans just might turn into our fans. Be cool, it's just a part of this program. Spit your best 16 if you must. You not whack, you just sound whack rapping after us. For real.
Busy week in sports as usual, but I know this isn't part of our show notes or whatever, but I do want to start here. Sure. Since we're gonna wait for Steve to show up and then and do that. Let's start with the Brooklyn Nets and their marquee matchup that was supposed to take place this week against the 76ers, and both KD and James Harden are out. Now, James Harden obviously has a hamstring injury, but KD, no dice because he needs to rest, even though he's been out for like months.
I don't know where you're going to go with this. I'm
just going to say Kobe and MJ would never.
I thought you were going to say we need to reduce the season by 10 or 15 games. So these
guys up, dude. Man up. 82-game season back in the day with more physical play than these dudes are experiencing now. There's no reason why they should sit out. But you know what? We'll table that discussion. We'll table that discussion because I'm gonna get too heated about KD sitting out for no reason, and we're gonna get to my man, Mr. Steve Lavin, joining us on the Total BS podcast. Steve, how's it going, buddy?
Terrific. How are we doing here on that? Should I be turning the camera one way or the other? You guys got to help me on the.
Oh, you're good, man. You're looking good. You're looking nice and spicy this morning, man. I like the gear in the back and everything. You're good, man.
I say, Coach Lavin's always looking spicy.
Always, man. He's always
trying to bring my A game here for you guys. All love.
The first time I ever met Steve Lavin was at the U of A, and he came out and he was wearing this sweet navy blue suit with the pinstripes and the blue shoes and everything. I was like, dude, I mean, come on, man. Like, you're living up to the I've always imagined Steve Lavin in one circle, and you lived up to the hype. Absolutely, Steve.
Well, that's very kind of you. The reality is, you come into Tucson and the McHale Center, Coach Olson's going to be in the stands. Now he's above us in the clouds. Rest in peace, smiling down on this show right here. We give him a little bit of love, but you always had to bring your A game when you came to McHale, because Lute Olson was the Cary Grant of college basketball. A great dresser and on point, and out of respect, you wanted to do that. I'm going less with the pinstripes now. I'm just going with the straight navy and charcoal grays. I've kind of eliminated the pinstripes from my rotation, unless it's, Big East tournament. I'm going to New York City in the Garden or something along those lines, or Chicago in honor of John Dillinger, or, Al Capone, or some of the great gangsters.
There you go. Walt Clyde Frazier in the house. So you got to embody that spirit. I got you.
Exactly.
Coach, speaking of Lute Olson, I was going to ask about him later on, but since you brought him up and you mentioned him smiling down on this show, we actually put Coach Olson in our show intro. So for those that are watching on YouTube and Facebook, we have this cartoon-like intro that was created to.
We'll show you. We'll show you the first 2 seconds of it. You want to see it real quick?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, here we go.
Yo, your fans just might turn into our fans.
So we had Kobe and Lute, two legends of the game, and so
So what do you thoughts on just an amazing life from Lute Olson and just his legacy that he left on not only the sport of basketball but on planet Earth?
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, at every stop, as a high school coach at Long Beach City College, at Long Beach State, at Iowa, and then obviously what he built in the desert at Arizona, he just set a level of excellence, the gold standard for others to emulate and to model. I know he had a big influence on my career, and just watching the way he conducted himself, his sideline demeanor, and obviously the confidence that his teams played with. In particular, I was impressed with his evolution as a coach and his flexibility. He adapted as the game changed. He was coaching early in the career without a shot clock, without a three-point line. And then in 97, when he cuts down the nets, that was a middle of the conference team, I think 11-7. That 97 team with Bibby and Terry and Dickerson and Simon, Bramelet, that was a special group. And it demonstrated to me Coach Olson's flexibility, the humility, because some coaches, they are who they are and they don't change or evolve. But to be successful for a sustained period of time, you have to be creative and use ingenuity. And I thought that small ball approach was emblematic. The 97 team that cut down the nets, no one expected them to. They went in as a lower seeded team, but interestingly, win the national title and beat 3 number 1 seeds on the way to the national title, the first time it's ever happened and the only time it's happened in the history of college basketball. And I just appreciated what a gentleman, what an ambassador, what a statesman Coach Olson was for the game. He would write handwritten notes. Might be a big win against a non-conference opponent like Duke or Louisville or Notre Dame, Kentucky. And I knew I would get a note from Coach Olson, handwritten. And he was special, just a Mohican, and really set that standard for young coaches to follow. He was the consummate professional teacher and coaching life skills. And that's why his players had such reverence for him. Even if they didn't see eye to eye at certain points, during their playing career, now that they look back, 10, 20, 30 years later, they understand what Coach Olson was trying to instill in them. And that was the tools, the fundamentals, the values and virtues that sustain you beyond sport, but prepare you for the challenges of life. And that is, to me, the ultimate teacher, and why I have so much respect for him. I was able to work his fantasy camp a couple years back when he was still with us, and also celebrate his birthday with, his former players. And to be around that degree of love that he had for his players and the players had for him was really inspiring, and something I'll treasure. Even though, of course, people are like, wait a second, what's the rival UCLA Bruin coach doing here in the Cat's Den in Tucson? But again, that spoke to the kind of person Lute Olson was. If you beat him, he was just as gracious. And when he, beat us, he still had the integrity, the grace, the class. And that's what I was, so impressed with. Win or lose, he was the same person. And he was fortunate that he won more often than he lost, obviously. That's why he's in the Hall of Fame. Speaking
of winning more often than they lost, the Pac-12 definitely won a lot in the tournament, both on the women's and the men's side. What was your overall impression of the Pac-12? Let's just talk about the men's tournament specifically, and how they pretty much surprised the country in their performance in the tournament.
Yeah, we might have to give some love to Larry Scott. He got beat up.
Timeout, coach.
And he took the blame for everything bad that's happened in the Pac-12. So we got to give him a little bit of love on a season where both the men's and women's crushed it. Yeah. And so we have to start there. It's only, fair. If you're going to blame everyone for the struggles, you got to also be able to give them some love and credit when things go well. And it was under his leadership that this happened. And so I start with that thought, and then just impressed. I mean, a real shot in the arm for the conference on both the men's and women's side. It's been well chronicled in terms of the struggles that we've had in football and basketball. But when I was asked about it through the years, I'd say it's cyclical, and people don't want to hear that. But there are times where things just line up, the perfect storm in the wrong direction for you. And we know that in our own personal lives. There's days, weeks, or years that don't go as well as others. And then sometimes we're rolling, hitting on all the right notes, and everything seems to come your way. And so this was a year in the NCAA tournament where I thought that was the most compelling story of the NCAA tournament, was the Pac-12's performance. UCLA, what a story that was. 4 straight losses going into the NCAA tournament. And then they recalibrate, kind of reset their mindset, take advantage of being in the first 4, go on to win 5 consecutive games, make it to the Final Four. And interestingly, after that, heartbreak loss to Gonzaga, you have to think UCLA probably would have been a better matchup, interestingly, against Baylor, because
Absolutely.
of UCLA's ability to control the tempo, impose that preferred tortoise or snail pace. They play at the 337th rated pace in college basketball. That is extra slow, but they are proficient. And they had a bunch of superstars that were blossoming right before our eyes. Johnny Juzang, his shot making and playmaking. Jaime Jaque has a tough matchup because he could play inside and out, had a rugged, tough-minded approach that gave UCLA a hard edge. Tiger Campbell played within himself, made good decisions in the NCAA tournament, really was efficient as the floor leader. And Cody Riley, took off and performed at a high level, is really the only true big man. With UCLA's injuries, they ended up going with a 7-man rotation, and I think that was the key to them taking flight in the tournament. And I think teams within the league know how to play one another better. They know their styles of play, their systems of play, the vulnerabilities and whatnot. And that's why I think UCLA had their struggles in conference play. But when they stepped in the NCAA and brought that tortoise pace, but also ran off of their defense when they had opportunities, Jules Bernard was also contributing at a high level. So hats off to Mick Cronin to be able to reset his team's mindset coming off 4 straight losses. And in 3 of those 4 losses, they had double-digit leads in the second half that they let get away. And yet you wouldn't have known that. When looking at UCLA, they looked confident in tight late-game situations and executed, made free throws, and didn't panic, coming down the stretch when trailing by a couple baskets. And so that is a credit to the psychology of Mick Cronin and his staff to get his team on point, and also credit to the young men that were getting it done. Those Bruins really brought an A-game performance during the NCAA tournament. They bring their nucleus back next year. Clearly, they'll be a top 5 team in the country and have a chance to get back to a Final Four and even cut down the nets next year.
Give those guys credit. Don't give Larry Scott credit. Coach Lavin. Don't ever give Larry Scott credit. Spending $7,000 a night at the Pac-12 tournament in Las Vegas.
I think more importantly than that, Justin, the announcement that Larry Scott is going to resign, and then all of a sudden, everybody's getting love in the tournament.
And Coach Lavin said, "Hey, things line up. Things line up. Just find it funny."
I like to bring that 12 Angry Men, the kind of Henry Fonda approach, being fair-minded, and let's give credit where credit is due.
There you go.
Larry Scott, still the commissioner at UCLA, and the other Pac-12, men's programs really represented at a high level, and the women's program was on fire as well. As you know, with the Cats in Arizona, what a performance and impressive run by the women's programs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about, the NCAA tournament as a whole, both the men and the women, one side each, Indianapolis, San Antonio. Did you like it? Did you not like it? What were some things that you think the NCAA might take a look at in terms of modifying, or should we just blow the whole thing up and go back to the way it was and regionalize everything?
I think that, first of all, high marks for Dan Gavitt. Mitch Barnhart, who's the head of the selection committee. Dan Gavitt is the son of Dave Gavitt, who was the founder of the Big East, and Dave Gavitt, a former coach at Providence as well. He's another Mohican, a giant that we, lost. Rest in peace to Coach Gavitt as well. But his son has carried the torch forward and really represented his legacy in a first-class manner because he's in charge of men's basketball championships for the NCAA. So Dan Gavitt and Mitch Barnhart deserve a salute, and all the selection committee members. I thought it was organized well, and it could be that this becomes a model, at least for the near future, whether we stay in Indianapolis or it's picking other cities and rotating the cities. But there are a lot of advantages to Indianapolis. And of course, that's where the NCAA, works out of. And, it's convenient. And when you could consider COVID and the complexities of the virus, there's something to be said for having the equivalent of a bubble, different than the Orlando bubble for the NBA. But there was that aspect of playing at all these venues. And they happen to be some great venues, too. Assembly Hall at IU and Hinkle Fieldhouse at Butler and Mackey Arena at Purdue, and then some of the modern venues like Lucas Oil. So I think high marks. And yes, there's a strong probability that this will be, in the near term, the way the NCAA tournament is played.
I love that part of it and just making it easier for everyone. But I also think about the number of cities that get to experience the NCAA tournament. Places like Spokane, Tucson's hosted first round events, Boise, Idaho. Does this possibly take away, those smaller cities having NCAA tournament sites, which generates money for those cities?
Yeah, no doubt. I think in the ideal world, if the virus were to go away and it's no longer a factor, then I think a return to the traditional March Madness model would make sense. But until we're, through it with certainty that the virus, no longer is a factor that has to be considered, I wouldn't be surprised if the NCAA doesn't take the conservative and the prudent approach in terms of the safety and the welfare of everyone participating in the tournament, not only the student athletes, but the fans, the media, and the organizers. So, and the city that hosts. And they've, really took all the precautionary measures and the protocol. The planning was precise and strategic. And if I'm not mistaken, other than VCU, right, every team was able to participate, either win in advance or get to play and go home. And that was the objective. So that's a pretty good percentage when you only have one team that wasn't able to participate in the tournament.
Absolutely. The University of Arizona made it higher this week, obviously, with Tommy Lloyd. I don't know how much you know about Tommy Lloyd, but, what was your overall impression, and what kind of job, or I guess, University of Arizona, obviously, besides UCLA in the Pac-12, obviously the bell cow of the Pac-12 when it comes to men's basketball. What kind of situation do you think he's stepping into, and what kind of challenges do you see ahead for him?
I know Tommy Lloyd well through the decades, and had good relations with the entire Gonzaga staff, going back to Dan Fitzgerald, who hired Dan Munson, and Mark Few and Billy Greer and, Ray Giacoletti, and Tommy Lloyd, one of the bright young coaches in the game. And he was patient, studied and worked at his craft, excellent recruiter, internationally as good as it gets in terms of bringing players from overseas. So he has a reach around the globe in terms of contacts. And he's not just a recruiter, though. Excellent teacher, has a great understanding of basketball, both offensively and defensively. And he's been, a central figure in these runs to the Final Four by Gonzaga. He knows the West Coast well. So I think he'll be an excellent fit at Arizona. He's going to learn more, in his first year as a head coach than he did at any point over the decades as an assistant. And I was the same way. 3 years at Purdue as an assistant under Gene Cady in the Big Ten was great training ground as an apprentice to learn about teaching and coaching. And 5 years at UCLA under Jim Herrick and a part of the national championship in '95 were great experiences as an assistant coach. But it wasn't until I became a head coach, 1996, 97, that you suddenly have an accelerated learning curve. Much like, a high school player that steps on a college campus and competes in his freshman year. That's a big jump from high school to college. And then I think you learn as much in that first year, that freshman year, about system and style of play and the work ethic that it takes to, be successful at the high level Division I programs. And then by your sophomore year, you've got a better sense and feel. So Tommy Lloyd has all the important ingredients, the traits, the characteristics or attributes that it takes to become a great coach. But he's going to have to go through it. It's a rite of passage. And it started with that press conference. That was the first press conference as a head coach. And then he's going to be recruiting. It'll be the first time he's recruited as a head coach. He's going to make a practice plan as a head coach. And then he's going to lead a practice for the first time as a head coach. And I'm happy for him, and couldn't be a better fit. And big expectations, as you mentioned. I mean, Arizona, as good as it gets because of what Lute Olson built and the standard that he set. And Sean Miller was an excellent coach and had some great years, conference titles, conference tournament titles, Elite Eights, knocking on the door to get to the Final Four, a bounce of the ball, an official's call, a made shot, or a free throw. And, Arizona could have easily been in 2 Final Fours and cut down the nets. So much of the tournament comes down to matchups, fate and destiny. You have to be so fortunate, be injury-free. And so let's not kid ourselves. Sean Miller had a terrific run. And I think it was a situation where you get to a place and it's diminishing returns for whatever the various reasons. This case was about the uncertainty of Sean's future and the sanctions that the NCAA was levying on Arizona. And so a fresh start is good for Sean and his family. He gets a reset and a new beginning, and will end up in basketball somewhere because he's too talented a coach to not end up in a good position somewhere. And then Arizona gets a new beginning and a fresh start, which I think is healthy for their athletic program and the university. And Tommy Lloyd is deserving of this opportunity. Again, he waited 19 years. He didn't just take jobs when they came along. He waited for a great one. And if he had stayed at Gonzaga, he would have ultimately taken Mark Few's place. So he had good options. He could have sit tight and then taken the baton from Mark Few when Mark wants to go fly fishing for the rest of his life. He loves the outdoors, the Northwest, and Tommy would have taken over. But I think this is a great opportunity for Tommy and a good situation for the university and athletic program and for the Cats fans. They're going to be happy with this hire.
For a guy like Sean Miller, for instance, Steve, you've been through this before yourself, where you coach at UCLA and then you get a chance to kind of maybe reset, and you kind of learn some things that maybe you wish you wouldn't have done early on or within your tenure, and then you kind of refocus. And then when you go to your new position, when you're at St. John's, you kind of reset and, okay, this is the way I should have done it the first time. Let's try and do it this time. You think that's going to be a situation that Sean Miller will kind of learn from everything he's done in the last 12 years and then take on to wherever he goes?
Yeah, basketball in its purest form is a metaphor for life. And so in any aspect of life, if you're interested, you're going to learn. And every experience informs our sensibilities. It informs the way we look at the world, the prism of the lens that we look at the world through. The ball side of, should I zone or should I man? Should I have called a timeout? Should I have substituted, not substituted? Called a timeout or not called a timeout? There's all those aspects from a strategic or technical standpoint of the game. There's the psychology as well. Why did I, not get more out of, this particular player? Why wasn't I able to get, him closer to the full expression of his potential as a basketball player? And the way I was brought up, my mother and father were educators, and Coach Katie was an outstanding teacher. And at UCLA, when I was with Jim Herrick, you're influenced by John Wooden. And I had known John Wooden back to my Purdue days because he was a Boilermaker from 1928 to 1932. But I was brought up that, basketball is a curriculum to teach life. And we talked about that earlier with Lute Olson, that, it's really the fundamentals of life that we learn through team sport. And that's the beauty of getting young people involved in sports, and team sports in particular, because you're learning about competition in a healthy way, preparation, resiliency, how to bounce back when things don't go well. And it's preparation for life after sport and basketball. So there's no doubt, I know from each of my stops, not only as a coach, you're learning and growing, but also the things that happen in your life when you're fired. That's an opportunity to grow and learn in terms of how do you respond, how do you bounce back, how do you move on or transition with grace and class and dignity, and to give thanks and to be genuinely grateful for the opportunity that you had. I was UCLA 12 years. That's a long time. That's the most of anyone on the bench since Coach Wooden did it for 27 years. I was an assistant for 5 and then a head coach for 7. So in my situation, I was extremely grateful for the opportunity. I had been a volunteer assistant, then the 3rd assistant, then the 2nd assistant, then the 1st assistant. Then I was the interim coach. Then I was the permanent coach. And then eventually I was the fired coach. So I experienced 7 different.
That's what we call evolution, Coach. Evolution.
There it is. And then we start over again, right? And then, television. The 7 years at ABC and ESPN working under Brent Musburger, another remarkable mentor to learn the fundamentals of television from, was a real gift. And then there was the opportunity to go back to coaching at St. John's, Big East, New York City. I was in the old Big East, when we had teams like Louisville, Notre Dame, and Pittsburgh, and Syracuse, and UConn now left.
The good old
They're
days.
back. Yeah. And then I had a couple years with the Realigned League, which was outstanding as well. And then I got the pink slip again. I got a new president. And even though we went to the NCAA tournament my last year, and we went to 2 NITs, 2 NCAAs, averaged 20 wins a year, and sent kids to the NBA like Jakar Sampson and Mo Harkless and Don Pointer, and Amir Garrett now is pitching with the Cincinnati Reds. But we were able to graduate our kids. A lot of them are overseas. A lot are doing well in different industries, both my UCLA kids and my St. John's kids. So you understand, you salute, you give thanks. And the new president wanted Chris Mullen because he was one of Coach Carnesecca's guys. And they were hoping that would, lead to greater attendance and maybe going to a Final Four or a national title instead of just going to NCAAs. But it's hard to get to the NCAA tournament. And now Mike Anderson's there taking a crack at it. And hopefully he'll get them to an NCAA tournament. But yeah, you do learn and you just give thanks and move forward. Life experience like cancer informs you. Losing your mother and father, as I have over the last 7 years, informs a different perspective in terms of compassion and empathy. And it also informs, my broadcasting style, because I've been on the hot seat. I've been in major media markets like New York and LA at programs like St. John's and UCLA. And the degree of scrutiny that you receive in those markets is intense. And so that gives me more empathy and compassion for what a coach is going through and the way in which I cover a game and the perspective I try and bring to inform viewers and also entertain them, but to give them context of, what a coach is going through and what that's like for his family and for his wife and what it's like at night, when you're by yourself with just your wife and you're going through it in terms of the uncertainty of your future in a particular profession. And, cancer definitely in terms of health and that battle informed me as well. So Sean Miller definitely has learned a great deal, and he comes from a coaching family. We know about Archie, and his father was a legendary high school coach. So he's going to move forward. I'm happy for him that he can take a deep breath, be off that hamster wheel. And because you're not even aware of it, when you're in that scenario, you have your armor on, you're going into that gladiator pit every day, and you relish that challenge. But it is taking a toll on your health. And so I don't think there's any doubt. I had cancer at a very young age of 45. And from what the doctors have said and studies have showed, the coaching profession definitely accelerates the cancer in terms of how quickly it can grow. And so make sure you always, do your blood work. Early detection is the key. And that's why I'm here today, grateful that we get to talk basketball and still in the mix in some form.
There you go.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. No, seriously, because a big part of this podcast is talking about sports, but also really putting life into perspective. And, over this past year, with George Floyd, with COVID, and just what we've all experienced over this past year. Yeah, it's great to talk about sports, but I also think it's incredible to have guys like you come and use this platform to talk about things that are more important in life.
For sure,
So I
for sure.
appreciate that, Coach.
Yeah, Steve, before we let you go, first of all, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us. But what are you up to now besides TV? Like, what are you into, and what's the future hold for you?
Well, I really enjoy my work in broadcasting, and there's the longevity aspect, relatively speaking, more security. I do miss aspects of coaching, and if there was a good fit, I would definitely consider a return for another tour of duty in coaching. But it has to make sense. I was enjoying myself at ABC and ESPN, learning from Brent Musburger. But St. John's was a good fit. I knew we'd be able to recruit there and win there as we did. Not in terms of national titles, which is what the new president, wanted to see. And hopefully they're going to get there sooner than later. But I knew we could have success, and we did. And I feel good about, what we accomplished at St. John's. And now 7 years down the line, it looks even better when you look at the 10 years prior to our tenure, before we got them back into the tournament, back nationally ranked, back signing kids that could move on to the NBA, but also had those kids just stayed 4 or 5 years and got their degree and represented the program in a first-class manner. So as you touched on, we learn from each of those experiences, and that's what would intrigue me in terms of coming back to coaching, because I know I'd be even better. I was a much better coach at St. John's than I was UCLA. Now at UCLA, we had the program already rolling, so my results were better than they were at St. John's. St. John's was a rebuild. It had been a decade, since we had winning records, a decade since we'd been in the NCAA tournament, winning records in the Big East, that is. So, yeah, another run in coaching would definitely intrigue. My health is terrific, probably in better condition than I was when I was coaching at UCLA and St. John's, because you have more balance and, you're able to take care of yourself in terms of exercise, get my steps in. I live up here in the Bay Area where I grew up in San Francisco. Came back here 4 years ago to be with my mother in the home stretch of her life, right? Our parents bring us into the world. It's a real gift or a blessing to be able to send them out in the manner they deserve as they cross the finish line. And I wasn't able to do that with my father because I was coaching. But I did have that time between UCLA and St. John's with my father, the 7 years, to really drop in as a friend, more than his son, because as you become an adult, the beautiful thing is your relationship with your parents change, and it becomes more about a friendship instead of them raising you or trying to, discipline you or keep you on the right track. So enjoy TV. The right coaching spot comes along, I definitely would entertain and be intrigued, but it has to be a good fit. I think sometimes coaches just chase it, and they're doing that either for their ego because they feel they have to prove they can coach or do better than they did in their prior stop, or they're chasing the money. And, I don't want to chase it. If it's a good fit, a mutual interest, then I'm all in, because I really enjoy working with young people. I've spent my life working with, people that are 15 to 22 years old. And my UCLA guys now are in their early 40s.
Yeah.
And my St. John's guys are
Man.
mid-20s to late 20s. So it's almost like the two marriages. You've got the older children from the first marriage, and you get the young ones.
Yes, sir.
You see the old timers that are, trying to keep up with their kids and the younger wife. And coaching, has that to a certain degree. And I love it because the different generations of kids kind of inform my view and perspective, which helps me in broadcasting. And they'll let me know, like, Coach, that's so yesterday. You can't do that anymore. And this is the hashtag, or, this is what's hip. This is what's cool. This is what's in, so, and also the different generations of kids, East Coast, West Coast, St. John's and UCLA, that have gotten to know each other. And so that's cool too. Back to like two families that become one. And those are things that I got into coaching for, and really feel fortunate and grateful that I've been able to coach at Purdue and UCLA and St. John's, first class universities. And that's also why, if it was a wrap and I stay in broadcasting the rest of my career, I'd be grateful for that too. You look at a lot of my mentors, the Dick Vitales and Digger Phelps and Al McGuire's and Bill Rafterty's. There's something to be said. There's a reason why they never came back to coaching, because they enjoyed that balance. But I still feel I got one more run left in me if it's the right fit.
There you go. Well, Coach, I met you. We actually had a discussion 3 years ago after DeAndre Ayton and Arizona won the Pac-12 tournament, and I was standing at half court. You came out, and you just stopped, and you just started talking, and we just started talking about ball, and we started talking about DeAndre and his performance, and what the future lies, and we didn't really know each other too well, and you followed me on Twitter. I followed you on Twitter, but when you left. I left with the same impression that you kind of started off the show with about Lute Olson, is like just the demeanor, the candor, the professionalism, and the class that he had. And when you left that day, I thought the same thing about you. You didn't have to stop. I was in what they call I forget the name is an unusual student, right? Like, because I'm 40, and I'm trying to find my way through this career after the military, and we just sat there and chopped it up for about 10 minutes, and I'll never forget that experience, because I was just like, this was the top of the line Division I head coach, and now he's one of the premier broadcasters in the country, and you gave the impression that you're not bigger than anything, and Bill Walton does the same thing. He'll spend a few moments to talk to you. And
what's your name?
What's your name? Yeah, always. What's your name? And where's my stool so I can sit down?
And also, after he asks you what your name is and you respond with your name, he goes, "I'm Bill." Like, we know.
I know who you are, man. Yeah. So I just wanted to let you know that I've always been impressed by you, and every person I've ever mentioned your name to has nothing but the greatest things to say about you. And I think that says more about you as a man than as a coach. And I appreciate you taking the time to come on to this show.
Well, I appreciate the kind remarks. And it is one of the wonderful elements of, coaching and broadcasting is we meet people on the road, like musicians that are barnstorming back in the day, the, big band or, jazz musicians, barnstorming, and you meet other people in that case, that love music, and in this case, love basketball, and sometimes both, love and basketball, and music and basketball. There are some interesting ties there, especially with music, because as you know, getting musicians to work together in harmony, right, to create good music, and the more they practice together, the more they understand one another's gifts. And there's a leader of a band as well, and that's the equivalent of a coach. And in basketball, we're trying to bring forth the best, the full expression of a group, different than music, but it's basketball, and there is that art form in both, in my view. But chatting like we are today, or meeting people on the road like we did a few years back, reminds us of the love we have for the game. Mm-hmm. And there's that shared commonality that leads to friendships and relationships, and hanging out like this on a Saturday, drinking coffee and chopping it up about Coach Olson. And we got Bill Walton into the mix, and Sean Miller and Tommy Lloyd. And so I really appreciate you guys allowing me to come in here and banter with you.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, best of luck in the future, and stay in touch. And if you ever need a Dobo, I'm available. So
I love it. I like the versatility. That's good. You got to wear a lot of hats.
There you
go. A lot of headsets. There's nothing wrong with that. And,
absolutely.
Let's do it again down the line. If you guys ever get to the Bay Area, let me know. I'll take you up to Napa or Sonoma, and we'll do some wine tasting. I'll introduce you to some of the wine somms up there and the wine directors, and we could have some fun. So
heck yeah,
we'll just bring our mask, and we'll be prudent on that front. We'll get a driver so that we don't get any DUIs.
There you go, Steve Lavin, always thinking about all the steps, like a good coach would. So Steve, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Take care, fellas. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Coach.
See ya. Steve Lavin in the house on the Total BS podcast, joining us. Dude, you know, like I said, Justin, like one of the all-time greats. I never get tired of listening to what he has to say. It's so insightful. It's so thought out. And man, can he remember a name or what?
Man, it's ridiculous.
It's impressive. It's impressive. He's just dropping names left and right. That Purdue assistant coach from 1956, and then blah blah blah. I'm like, whoa, dude! Like, I can barely remember my fiance's name from time to time. You know what I mean? Like,
you do the snap fingers.
Yeah, like you know what I mean?
What's
I'm sitting here trying to remember to say non-traditional student. That's the word I was trying to find. I can't even find that. He's like, yeah, you know. So you know, Jordan Wooden's little his landscaper's name was Skippy and blah blah blah. And I'm like, what the hell? What? So just very awesome. You know, Justin, you've been around. You're young, but you've been around. You've been around. Quite a bit, you know, covering U of A sports for the most part, but you've come across these guys, and each one of these guys has a special ability to tap in to make you feel like you're an important person.
Yeah.
Even though we're all just people, right? Nobody's more important than the other, but it's that unique ability to be like, so what are you about? And embrace you, even if it's only for a few minutes, and then that's it. And that's a really cool trait that I try to take on myself. I know you try to take on yourself, Justin. You have that ability as well. Like every person that's ever met you has always been like, man, I like that guy. You know what I mean? Because you make them feel a certain way about themselves, and it's a unique trait, and I think it's definitely a high quality for people to have.
Coach Lavin, when you brought up the story about him coming out to center court to talk to you about just everything and anything about DeAndre Ayton and what happened that night. I have a kind of a similar story about Steve Lavin coming out and connecting. It was my birthday, 4th of July, for those people wondering. And I'm sitting at a gas station pumping up my car, getting gas. And I get a text message, and it's from Steve Lavin. And this is at like 9:15 at night. And it just says, hey, friend, just wanted to wish you a happy birthday. I'm like, I don't. How the hell did Steve Lavin even find out that today was my birthday? Because Steve Lavin doesn't have Facebook. We're not friends on Facebook. So how did you find out is my birthday? Maybe Twitter. I don't know.
I mean, you probably said something on Twitter.
No, I don't. I'm not that guy that's like blessed to see 25.
Hashtag blessed.
Hashtag blessed. But you know those people that are like that want people to know it's their birthday without saying, "Hey, it's my birthday." Yeah. They're like blessed to see 25.
25 years ago, I came out the canal.
Odds were stacked against me. No,
but
nobody
made it through.
made it through. I don't know how Steve Lavin discovered it was my birthday, but he texted me happy birthday, wanted to wish me well, and I was like, man, Coach Lavin is just the absolute best. And before that, I wrote a story about Parker Jackson Cartwright that you edited and helped put together about just everything that he overcame, being a shorter point guard, playing high-level Division I basketball. Steve Lavin, not only he didn't just retweet me, he shared my story on his page and said, unbelievable story by Justin Spears. And he's always shown support, and he never had to. He didn't have to.
It doesn't take much.
And that kind of guy right there with all the connections and the people that he knows over the years, from being at UCLA, from being at St. John's, for him to consider little old me as an acquaintance, I just think it's so special. And you talk about that effect that you leave on people. Steve Lavin is just one of those guys that just makes you feel good about yourself. And
oh yeah, absolutely. He just spent 30 minutes talking with us about ball.
And
you know
life.
I mean? Like life and ball, you know what I mean? And like that's one of the great things, you know, on our earlier podcast today on the Sun Solar panel, we talked about Monty Williams and his ability to connect with his players. And the one thing I said is, you know, being able to have the life experiences that I've had, I've seen leaders both good and bad. And the one common theme between all the leaders that were good is they care about you. They care about you as an individual, and they want to see you succeed some way, somehow, because if you succeed, we all succeed, right? And good leaders care more than just about the bottom line. You know what I mean? Because they know that if you take care of X, Y, and Z with said individual, the bottom line will take care of itself. It will.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you get players to buy into your program, but more importantly, buy into you and what you're trying to build within that program, they will run through a wall for you. But if players think that you're just out for yourself, you're going to get uneven performances. And I think in some of these coaching searches and subsequent coaches that got fired, I think they ran into those pitfalls of like I'm the program instead of the program is the program and I'm trying to help guide it. And that's the major difference there. So just a tremendous interview. And thanks again to Steve Lavin for taking the time on this Saturday up in the Bay Area. Clearly the sun is shining up there and it didn't look like it was a bad place to be right about now. And Napa sounds pretty good. I'm not going to lie.
That wine country, man. It had me sitting there for a second when he brought up wine country. I was like sipping my coffee, like swishing around my mouth, like trying to taste all the ingredients. Like
spit it out in your other cup, like, yeah, that's a bit nutty. Oh man. Anyway, let's move on to other people that probably visit wine country. The one and only Alex Rodriguez, getting an ownership stake in the Timberwolves. Pretty cool. Also, Dwayne Wade, ownership stock in the Jazz. Unique situation all the way around. Let's start with Alex Rodriguez. What was your whole take on the Timberwolves buy?
I'm disappointed that it wasn't Kevin Garnett of all people, and KG was in the mix to take ownership stake in the Minnesota Timberwolves. And if there was anybody that could have done it, I would have wanted a guy like Kevin Garnett, who's been in the league, who's been the face of the Minnesota Timberwolves ever since he first stepped foot in the NBA until he went on to play for the Boston Celtics. Having arguably the greatest player in franchise history take ownership would have been a great deal, but I also like Alex Rodriguez going and partnering up with Mark Lohr, who is an exec for, who's
former exec with Walmart, yeah.
Walmart. So he's got a big wig on his side, and they're teaming up, and they're going to take ownership and kind of help out with the NBA and where it's going. And I think having a young guy like Alex Rodriguez who has a grasp of where professional sports is going, we've heard him talk on ESPN, on Fox, very smart, intelligent guy who is very business savvy. And he was actually in contention to buy the New York Mets with his former fiance,
J-Lo, yeah.
And I'm very sad it's no longer a thing anymore. But Jennifer Lopez, they were going to buy the Mets. Things fell through, and then Alex Rodriguez shifted his focus towards the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm just very ecstatic for A-Rod, even though we don't get to see J-Rod anymore.
J-Rod is no more. But I think that's kind of where I go with this, is that I understand how people are upset that Kevin Garnett didn't get a stake in this, right? However, if you've seen A-Rod and you've seen his dealings, you see that he has been kind of prepping himself in the business world to be a major player in the sports industry. And I think what he's doing is set himself up to do just that. That's one of the things that I find remarkable about athletes like Alex Rodriguez, right? I think by and large, every athlete that gets to the NBA gets to professional sports, here's similar advice. Like, hey, this is just temporary. You don't know how long this is going to last. Make sure you're prepping yourself for the next step. A-Rod did just that. As he was going through his major league career, he's networking, he's making relationships. He understands that, I made a $250 million contract, or I have a $300 million contract for the next whatever years, but I want to build on that to make overall wealth for the long term, not just for me, but for my family and their history. And I think the wealthy families in American history have done just that. And I think A-Rod, as a minority as well, is trying to establish that path for his family tree. And I think it's remarkable. Yeah. And being able to set yourself up, that's who you want to identify with. That's who you want. The Larry Fitzgeralds of the world, they do that. the good athletes and the smart athletes understand that this sport is a temporary place. It's 10, 15 years if you're lucky. NFL's even shorter. So you got to take advantage of these situations and really set yourself up for success in the future.
When also, too, you mentioned being a part of the New York Yankees organization. He's seen great owners. He's seen the Steinbrenner family own the New York Yankees. So he's had a connection with them. And also being in the media at ESPN, at Fox, he's been able to kind of go back behind the curtain, right? Being in our job, Saul, we're able to see the business side of sports and how everything operates. Because we're behind it, we kind of get to see how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
So I think with Alex Rodriguez building up that resume, getting those connections, and understanding what it takes to own a franchise, even if it's not Major League Baseball, he's going out of his element and going with the Minnesota Timberwolves, I think is very special. Whereas a guy like Dwayne Wade going with the Utah Jazz, it's incredible. I mean, you see a number of NBA players, not as many as you'd like to see, but there have been a number of NBA players that have dabbled in having exec positions and taking ownership. Magic Johnson is probably
Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan with the Charlotte Hornets. So I think Dwayne Wade going with the Utah Jazz is special for the NBA. They need more players representing them and pursuing the league and making the league just an overall a better product. We can agree, or at least you and I, Saul, can agree, I don't know about our listeners, that the NBA is the best ran professional sports league in sports. It's
one of them. I will also say this when it comes
because
to
it's all about their players.
For sure. I'll also say this in regards to Dwayne Wade and the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz, from a public relations perspective, have probably one of the worst reputations in the league in terms of their fans and how they conduct themselves. The racism, there's been countless instances of racism in Utah. I think it's quite remarkable that a gentleman of Dwayne Wade's stature, his background, his family, yes. he has a kid who is transgender and or identifies as other than what they are. I hope I get that right. I'm trying to put the verbiage correctly. So if I got that wrong, I apologize. But there's a lot of different facets to who Dwayne Wade is. He's a fashion guy. He's got, Gabrielle Union is his wife, and she's an actress, and they do a lot of different things and promotions, and they do a lot of different things for the community. Like, they are very active. They're a very active couple. And so the fact that Dwayne Wade is now in with the Utah Jazz in what you and I can agree with is one of the worst cities in the history of civilization in Salt Lake City.
Burger King closes at 9 p.m.
Dude, it's the worst. It's not even Burger King. What's that burger spot that we went to? Oh, I can't remember. It was like King Burger or something like that. So the Burger King has a crown on the outside of it. If you're from Salt Lake and you know what it is, hit us up in the chat. But I think this is a way to kind of break that mold and start to change the fabric of that franchise, and at least maybe influence the fan base in a better way, and especially in a way that they should be conducting themselves better than what they have shown.
Yeah, and I think one of the, I shouldn't say better examples, but one of the more just examples that resonates with me about the fan base in the Utah Jazz was when Derek Fisher went back to the Lakers because his daughter had eye cancer.
Yeah.
And so going back to LA, seeing the best specialists, the best doctors for her, when the Lakers went back and played against the Jazz, either in a regular season game or a playoff series, I forgot which one it is, there were fans that were shouting stuff at Derek Fisher, and one of them was even covering his eye while he was saying stuff to Derek Fisher. That kind of stuff right there is just so out of line and disrespectful that I sit there and look at the Utah Jazz as like one of the top teams in the NBA, and I'm like, I hate them so much. I don't want them to succeed. And I like Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert and all the guys that they have, but it's just their awful fan base that makes me root against the Utah Jazz. And maybe maybe something with Dwayne Wade changes that. It's just unfortunately Salt Lake City is what it is,
which is
and
so
you can't
crazy.
change the fans.
Which is so crazy because Salt Lake City is basically known as a heavy Mormon populated city, and the Mormon culture is essentially the opposite of what we see in the stands and at the arenas, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of crazy that you would have that influence from the outside, but on the inside, it's just crazy. And no, I totally agree. And I think there's a difference, right? Like, I think you have fanatic fan bases. Like, I think the Laker fans are crazy. And I think you can agree on that, right? Laker fans think that they should get every single person ever. Yankees fans, same thing. Red Sox fans, Dodgers fans. But those fan bases aren't loathsome in this regard. We're talking about conduct. Like, you are a Laker fan and you'll talk trash to me because, the Lakers have 16 championships and the Suns have 0.
17.
Like, okay, whatever. Like, you'll say that, right? However, like, you won't say something and then throw some race into it. That's the biggest difference here. And so,
which is so weird because the University of Utah, their fans aren't like that, and they're in the same city.
It's true. It's just weird. It's just a weird dynamic, dog. I don't understand it. Anyway, before we go, last thing, I know you had a couple other things, but we're just going to wrap this up because it's almost been an hour. I'm just going to ask you one question. Would you take a punch from Aaron Donald for $1 million?
Oh, yes. For
Did you see that dude's face, though? And that dude was a big guy.
Yeah.
Justin, I don't know if you survived that, man.
Yeah.
You might be like Hurricane all over again.
I saw
you'll be like $1 Million Baby. I got $1 million, but I can breathe through this tube.
I saw the photo of that poor chap, and I did say chap. I don't know how that came into my mind, but
which also, by the way, was a false story.
What's a false story?
The guy getting hit by Aaron Donald.
It was false?
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's false. Not Aaron Donald?
He came out and apologized. Yeah. It was a made-up story.
Oh, man. How things have changed between the time I made the show notes until we actually do the show.
Oh, how the tables have turned.
Oh, how the turntables. But I don't know if I take a punch from Aaron Donald, but for $1 million, I might consider it. I actually threw out the question to my older brother. I'm like, how about $200,000? Just one good punch to the face. And he was like, no. And even if you accept that money, how much is your hospital bill going to be?
Like, anywhere but the face, cool. I'll take it for $1 million. But the face, man, dude, you might have brain damage, man. You might not even be able to count to 5.
Getting punched in the sternum by Aaron Donald?
Oh,
you're done.
I've actually been punched in the sternum once before. So we were playing this game. It's so stupid. It was called BB Britches. And yeah, so stupid. So stupid. And I was like my junior year of high school, and it was a bunch of us. It was like 15 of us. And if you said any word with the letter B in it, dudes could just go ham on you until you say BB Britches. And so we're all sitting there, and everybody obviously is calculating what they're saying, right? They're like, yeah, so I did not go to the, like, because they're trying to think, did this have B in it? You know what I mean? And so
you sound like Crips.
Yeah. So this one kid says something with the letter B in it, and I'm like, oh, I got it. I got him. And me and this other dude look at each other like, yeah, we got it. I'm like, yeah. And right before I'm about to throw my blow, this dude hits me in the sternum. So like I'm already cocked back, and he hits me right in the chest. And I had basketball practice that night. I couldn't even pick up my arm because I was so bruised in my sternum because he hit me so hard. And I was just like, this is the worst feeling ever. Like I couldn't even eat. I had to like just stick my face into like mashed potatoes that night.
And your worst luck, you were the inbounds passer, so you had to lift up your arms.
Yeah. Chest. I had to sit out practice that night. I was like, Coach, I can't even pick up my arms right now. I had to ice my chest. I
say you sound like Bloods and Crips, how they can't say the letter of the opposite gang. So you guys were all Crips. You couldn't say anything with the letter B in it.
So stupid.
I think it's
so
awesome.
stupid.
BB Bridges.
BB Bridges. So.
Steve Lavin and BB Bridges.
There you go. What an episode today, man. Hey, again, thanks to Steve Lavin for joining us. This was one for the books, man. I really enjoyed today's conversation with Steve and what he brought to the table. Just a unique individual, and I love him to death. And Justin, love you to death. I'm glad you were able to arrange that. So tell the people where they can find us.
Total BS Podcast is everywhere that you can listen to podcasts. We are on Apple, Spotify, Google, everywhere. We're also on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, social media at Total BS Podcast. Make sure you search that, subscribe, rate, review, follow, do whatever you can.
There you go. And until next time, we appreciate you joining us. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit that like. Make sure you leave a 5-star review, just like my man said.
Yes.
We'll see you when we see you next time. Peace.
Yo, your fans just might turn into our fans. Be cool, it's just a part of this program. Spit your best 16 if you must. You not whack, you just sound